everyone. Anyone find things you want to share with us? Okay, maybe we're feeling shy. That's okay. Today, I want to start talking about who's your customer side. So yeah, like thanks, like that's good. I hope the business law part gives some context, because oftentimes it's really the information where we don't pay attention and don't teach in engineering school make a lot of difference for a lot of engineers when you go and pursue the entrepreneurship venture. So today, what we want to focus on is actually who is your customer, understand that, and this is the basic foundation. If you have taken my design class or chat with me before, you know that I'm quite biased on actually who are customers, and it's really important to talk to them. And I may have already shared certain aspects of this with you before, but today you will actually be able to see a more systematic way how we're actually approach to the customer, and how do you know you're actually creating value for them. And I'm going to try to make this a bit more like a workshop rather than a lecture. So we'll have some interactions as well. So here's first thing first, we want to understand who's your customer. And then at this stage, in order to actually understand who's your customer, you need to do a lot of research. We might actually need to do market segmentation. So you need to actually understand how to do that. So not only going out to talk to people. If you're already doing that, that's great. If you don't, you need to go talk to people. But because talking to people is the cheapest way to get the good information, and the first thing you can do in a startup company that costs you nothing. But just because you're talking to people doesn't mean we're actually doing that effectively. We need to actually do market segmentation. I think Chris, as the business person, he really understands that part. So we might draw on Chris, his experience on that as well. And then you need to be able to select the markets as you segment them, focus your energy, and then look at who are your end users and understand the market set. So that's the focus of this talk. From here, some of you may have heard about this company before, especially I think Dawson was there when actually the CEO of this company came into the GE 490 lecture. So this is a company called TinyEye, their local company. What they do is an online service. They provide speech therapist service to children who actually need to see a therapist. Pretty straightforward, right? Who do you think their customers are? Does anyone have a guess?
The parents of the children?
Parents? I think Nielsen also said parents. Okay, that's really good. Like now you get just the children, because parents are the ones paying for it. You're a step ahead, but it's actually more complicated than that. Why I'm saying this? Because if you talk to Greg about his business, he'll tell you that almost killed his business because he didn't quite understand who the customer. So what happened was, I use this example is oftentimes when people think about user and the customer, we often confuse them. and we think whoever is using our product is a customer. And in one way they are, right? So in this case, the kids might be the customer, but so look at Bart. Bart Simpson is a Hellraiser, and he really wants a skateboard. So then, as you already know, he may not have the money to pay for it. So you actually have to go to the economic buyer, which is Homer in this case. But you might need to reconsider that, because Homer actually wants donuts. So then when you have those situations, you need to be able to convince them. And in this situation, many of you said it's parents. It's because you're assuming you're actually asking the parents to pay. What that means is you need to go out and convince individual parents to buy a product. And you need to be able to go out and find children who need speech therapists, and then find their parents and convince them. That's one route to go if you can identify them. But as I'm describing this, maybe you realize, man, that's a lot of work, because it's really literally trying to find a needle in a haystack. You're looking at the whole population, now even far to Saskatchewan, we have 1 million people, how many children, and how do you reach them? And one of the more effective way you're realizing, maybe they're in the school. So you need to go through school boards. That might be more effective. So in that case, is the school board the economic buyer? Maybe. But so like the question is when you ask who is your customer, is much more complicated in that situation. And then let's go back to the Simpson family. Actually, you realize maybe you make a skateboard. Bart really wants a skateboard. So Homer might be paying for it, but in the family, it's Marge, the wife, makes the decision. So you need to figure out who has the money and who decides how to spend the money. It may not be the same group of people. So even that, there is a split. You need to find out who makes the decision. And you also want to actually find out who can actually promote your product. You also want to find out who can influence the people who want to buy your products, right? So your recommender and influencers may not be the same people either. So you have to find that out. And then are there people who are actively going out and preventing you from selling to your customer, right? This little sister might be one of those people don't really like the big brother have a skateboard. I use this example to help you think about what that might be. So in Greg's case, in Tiny Eye's case, you're right, children are the users, and the parents could be a customer, but they found out they were not, because it's much more effective to actually approach a school board. And then on that side, they realize it's actually much more easier to convince the school board and find out who makes the decision. Well, you need to go to the people who actually approve the budgets for any kind of benefits. And then, so understanding that decision-making unit helped them to find out in the school if you actually want to sell them a set of equipment and a set of software, and charge upfront is qualified as capital purchase, and that needs to be approved by school board. But if you sell it as a service, as if you are selling the speech therapist hour to them, then they actually count it as operational purchase. Then it's actually the school principal making that decision. So that changed how many level of approval you need to go through. And it makes a significant amount of difference in terms of what's the legislation you need to get through, how many people you need to convince. So when you think about your customers, you have to think about it quite in depth, and don't take the easy answer. Sometimes the obvious answer may lead you down the wrong path and will waste you months of time talking to the people who may not have the power and help you actually make the sales. So on that, really, your customer is really an ecosystem of people that need to understand, satisfy, and convince in order to get them to buy your product, right? So if you're lucky, some of those roles are the same person. If you're trying to sell beer, typically the guy who drinks the beer are the one who buy the beer. But if you're trying to sell something slightly different, especially if more complex enterprise level product, oftentimes that's not the person who uses it may not be the person who actually buy it. So be careful and do your legwork. And this is why I cannot emphasize enough, if you have not talked to people, pick up the phone and start talking to people. So in Greg's case, he actually had 4 customers, the children who are using it, the speech therapist who are actually teaching on the other end, they need to actually sign up. So they are what I call a two-side platform type of business. You actually need to provide value on both sides in order to be successful. The parents, as many of you know this, they need to be championing in that situation, because they need to actually voice to the school, this is helping and work. And the school and the school board, they need to make a decision and actually pay the bill. All of those people have influence on how your product should be designed, how it should be used, but not all of them are created equal. So you have to understand what level of influence they have and what power they have on this whole design process and whole sales process. When you design a business, it's really no different from you conducting your engineering design, but you have to involve high level of system thinking. Cannot focus on only on any one portion. You have to think systematically, make sure you touch all the area and make sure it works. And then I said before, in many ways, you already know how to do this. This is because what I call this is a scientific method. Especially if you are doing your grad study, you use this every day. If you don't, your engineering design process is derivative from this. So you have heard about this in your first year engineering design. Typically, in a scientific research environment, we push you to define your problem, what exactly you're trying to solve. And with that, you can form a hypothesis. And from there, you only have very few ways to interact with the real world and gathering data, right? You either make a directly observation, that's the primary data, you get it firsthand, or you become one of the research subjects yourself and act in a way, and then in business world, that means you become a customer yourself, do the immersion understanding, or you conduct hypothesis experiments, test on that. That's what market research is. You want to gather lots of data, and then like you want to examine if the data you've been gathering match your assumption or not, or your hypothesis or not. If it match, wonderful, you can actually continue and actually draw your conclusion, communicate in the scientific world, and then in business world, you can move on. But if it doesn't, you actually need to think about what are the hypotheses maybe need to be changed, or is that the research method need to be changed, and then conduct a new experiment to go. Typically, if you've been doing your research work accurately, often it's not the research method need to be changed, it's the hypothesis need to be changed. And then this is another thing. You guys are all very smart engineers, and one of the sin for great smart people and great entrepreneur is you have this ability, what I call reality distortion field. You will make a bad idea look like a great one. That's one of the charms for great entrepreneurs. The handset of that is, of course, if you distort the reality, you may not see it clearly, and you might get misled by your passion and by your charismatic and by your conviction in certain situation. So really, the action of going out and talk to people will help you to understand what the truth is and set you free in many ways to actually step on. So great entrepreneurs never hide behind the computer screen. There's no truth in the spreadsheets. You have to be able to go interact with customer. I could end my talk right here, but if I do that, it does you no good, because you hear this type of talk all the time, and so you go out and talk. But it's like if I tell you the key to entrepreneurship is you have to choose. You choose success. What does that do to you? It doesn't do any good. We have to have a systematic approach. So a principle you can follow and actually do that. So this is a 6-step approach I really enjoy and prefer. It benefits lots. It goes starting from like going out and then doing market segmentation, figuring out which market I should focus on, and then trying to generate the end user profile and calculating how much cash that market can generate. If that can generate sufficient enough cash, great, we'll move forward. If not, we'll go back, like we said in the scientific method. So business design and business discovery is just as iterative process as any other design process. You're never done. You continue doing your research and learn. From there, if you can actually find something good, you want to narrow your effort to one single customer or one single type of customer you can serve, and then build a cash base. From there, you can go forward. So that's what we'll go through now, see like what happens in the next 6 steps. So the step 1 is market segmentation. I'm actually going to pick on Chris a bit. Chris, can you share a bit about what you learned and remember from business school about market segmentation?
Yeah, I guess what do you want, like just like in general, do you have kind of anything specific? I mean, because yeah, at the end of the day, it as the name describes, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, you need to have kind of the target market, right? I mean, you kind of went into that, and I mean, divided into groups. I mean, like the main concern, I think, or the main thing to be aware of is, ensuring that you do kind of properly, narrow it down, like you said, to kind of ensure that you're putting your resources into the correct market, right? I mean, you really want to leverage that information in order to maximize your return on investment.
Yep.
I don't.
How like I think like sorry picking on you.
No, it's okay. I'm just trying to understand what exactly.
Yeah. So like, what are some starting points when you look at the market? How do you segregate them? Because I think it's one of the fun things common sense is really only common when you know it. So this is a common skill for business students, but may not be for engineering students. Maybe I'll come back to like and then so typically like what I'll do. This is business 101, right? Like when you want to do market segmentation, you want to think about what industry you're working in, and but sometimes you want to like jump out a little bit more. Think about what application that can be in that industry. What are some pros and cons for implementing your solution, or a proposed solution, or for you to solve that problem you're thinking of? My thinking is traditionally, oftentimes people divide market segmentation based on 4 types of criteria, right? You can do geographical. So if you want to target markets in Saskatchewan, great. If you want to target Canada, that's how you focus on your research. But that's quickly going out of date in some ways because especially if you're innovation-based business, you really should target more broadly than a local service. A restaurant targets a city, maybe the province. A dry cleaner can do that. You should focus a little bit broader if you can, because sometimes geographic constraint will limit your sales, right? If you are selling medical device, you want to focus on Saskatchewan. How many hospitals are in Saskatchewan? You have to focus on the industry. So that's one you need to consider. Demographic, that means you focus on the type of customer, how old they are, how much money they have, and typically where do they live. That can be a pretty decent predictor, because think about people who were born in the 60s, they tend to have certain type of spending habits. They may like the Coke, like their beer. Typically, this is a bit stereotypical. They may enjoy hamburgers more than vegetable. Versus people who are born in millennials, like at a younger age, there are way more vegetarians than previous generation. So that demographic change will create opportunity. So now if you're in plant protein business, all of a sudden it becomes viable because of that demographic change. And that's actually like in a lot of ways combined is what Facebook is doing really well. But another one is even better. It's called behavioral. So now if you actually have the geographical information, you have the demographic information, you realize just because you go to a neighborhood in Saskatchewan and you pick every single person in the same age group in that neighborhood, they may still behave differently, right? Or even if we go to the University of Saskatchewan, all of you are in the same demographic group. You're all students, but you behave differently. So now, we have to have another predictor. How do you behave? Can we actually accurately predict the customer behavior? This comes down to actually, in many ways, what you see nowadays, all the privacy discussion about advertisement data, how they draw your behavior, how long you browse, what kind of information you like, what thing you purchase. They're building complex artificial intelligence model to predict what you're likely to buy. Oh, Amy just got a cat. Maybe she needs cat food. Send an ad. But for you as an entrepreneur, what you want to do is actually to build a mental model to accurately predict your customer. This is often why I push quite hardly, especially in the medical device design. I've done this myself. You have to go to the hospital, spend time, um, eat, eat lunch with them, drink coffee with them, trying to understand what kind of music they listen, what they do when they relax. It doesn't really even affect how they um, use the products, it seems. But trying to get into their mind, if you can't do that, don't write any software or don't design any product for those people, because you won't be able to actually fully understand what that means and how they'll be used. And then the other one is to go into more psychology part. I'm not going to get into that. I want you to, if you are still continuing like your research in this week and then beyond, focus on those three domains, especially the behavioral domain. Um, you have to be able to understand that. And then the other thing is come back to what we talked about earlier. Who is your customer? Can you find out which ones are early adopters? What I mean in that is, even if you have a great technology, when you send that to market, not everyone will buy it at the same time. Think about iPhone. It was released in 2008 or 2007, but not everyone start using it. I only bought my first one in 2009, maybe 2010, right? But then I was still early when most people are still using flip phone. And then all of a sudden by 2012, you see it's almost everywhere. Now, even a great product like iPhone is revolutionary, you realize how long it takes to actually go from a small group of tech nuts to go into a mainstream customer. So your product will go through the same process, and we don't know how long it will take. But if you can focus on the early adopters and find them out and focus targeting them for your design process and your sales process, will give you better chance to success. Regulators, who are the ones set industry regulation? Do you need to pass the CE regulation, or do you need to go through FDA? Which industry standard apply? Find that out, and because it not only will help you avoid some logistics hurdles later on, it will also actually help you design your product and use existing solution more effectively. And market size, how big is the market? I said before, I typically recommend a total market size of between 5 to 20 million. If you don't know how to calculate total market size, just Google it. There are tons of resources out there, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that. But the rule of thumb is you estimate a market and assume every single person in that market bought your product in 1 year. How much money would that be? If you cannot have a $5 million market, the market is likely too small. You may not be able to sustain yourself. If the market is bigger than 200 billion or sometimes 20 billion, you may attract severe competition once you step into it. So focus your effort, really important. Let's look at an example. This is actually my first entrepreneurship, well, second entrepreneurship journey, if you don't count the family initiative. So I had the privilege to work with this professor, Ding Haishu. He's passed away 1 year after we actually set up the venture. But he was the one gave me an opportunity to work with this phenomenal technology he worked on in Pennsylvania. And so it's a do with non-invasive tissue oxygen monitoring. They were able to calculate what's the tissue blood oxygen level. And so many of you may have seen this in hospital. And at the time when we were working on this, there were only 2 countries had the ability to make this product, was the States and Japan. So I worked with them. We developed this product, and then we're looking at, okay, how can we sell this? One of the things we did is like any good entrepreneur, we look at the market size. The US market alone was $700 million. Great market, right? But the problem is, this is also my peeve. Like when you hear presentations, a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you, oh, this market is $200 million. If I get 10% of market, it'll be this big and will be quite profitable. But if you tell me that, it tell me one thing and one thing only: you haven't done your market segmentation well enough. Because this is the overall market. There are tons of different scenarios and different customer groups and different needs you need to address. If you go in there without focus, you will constantly learning new process, and you find your product doesn't fit, and you will waste a lot of time in your sales process, and you cannot train your people to actually go out and make a sale effectively. But so you have to be able to do a good market segmentation. And the other thing is, this is math 101 too. Even if you want a 10% market, that might be 10 other startups plus 2 major players in that market. You simply cannot all have 10% of the market. So we have to do something. So this is what I want you to consider. And it's really not rocket science. It's much easier, but it requires hard work from you. So what we did is really look at the industries we want to work at. And then within each industry, we ask ourselves, who are the end users within that industry? What are the applications they use it for? What benefits does our products can provide them? And if you don't have a product yet, think about what benefits does that your technology, or by solving that problem, can provide to them. Who are some of the lead customers? If they purchase your products and use, can actually guarantee some good word, and they so then it actually gave you good reputation. You don't want to only engage with small players. You want to have someone have some influence in the industry. If they adopt your product, everyone else will follow. What are the market characteristics? Who are the partners you can actually rely on in helping you? Because this will be important as you think about how do you deliver your solution. What are the size of market? As I've talked before, it needs to be a decent size. Who are the competitions in there? If you do go out there, who will likely be your competition? What kind of platform do you need to use to survive on in many ways? And then really what needs or problem you're solving and addressing. I will send this slide to you so you have an opportunity to look at this, but really don't follow this. You need to consider for your own. And then we examine the industry differently. I will just quickly go through some of them. One of this, for me, I'm personally more passionate about it, is sports teams. I was on the soccer team. In many ways, our coach can never tell how fatigued we are. So the substitution and lineup is not necessarily done right. And then our lead customers was the team I play on, and then the city's team. When you think about lead customers, be specific. Can you actually go find out exactly which school they are, which hospital they are, who are the people you need to talk to there? Because that will help you focus your energy, and then so you're not going through a process where with fuzzy picture. You want more clear picture and then go in there. In that market, because it's sports market, we know they are quite eager to use early technology. They're willing to pay, and there's high growth potential. And then we find this partner. It was a US startup. They could potentially use our technology, so they can either be a partner or they can be a competition. That depends on how you develop that relationship. But what we find is in that industry, you need to have this standalone. It has to be portable. We weren't quite there technologically, so that was actually not a red market for us. Then we continue to look at adjacent markets, right? And then we look at kidney market. We realize those are some people, if they don't actually get their oxygen level right, they actually have the risk of renal failure, so they may lose their life. Well, quite urgent need, I would say. And then I really only need real time, and then the doctor wants to have the ability to take notes and then make a record. So the nephrologist told us that's our need. So it seems doable. And we realized we don't need to develop a standalone platform because the patients will be there, they'll be examined. The doctors are making notes on Windows computer anyway, so we can actually leverage the processing power of a computer. Seems okay, and then there is a decent market size. We also look at the surgical monitoring. That was a larger market, but we realized there was more competition, and we weren't ready for that. Long-term care, home care, we thought about those. There are good opportunities, more competition, and we realized the buying process is more complex. And then especially in the home care sector, potentially everyone needs to buy. But now, like, this is becoming dealing with individual customer versus if you deal with institutional customer. We could have gone to space program to support actually sending astronauts to space, but we realize that's a limited market. So even if we spend lots of R&D effort, it won't really give us the ability to grow. And then, like I said before, when you start, your segmentation and your market research should never be done, right? I list the COVID-19 here. Back then, that wasn't a thing, so we never thought about it. But now with the COVID-19, actually your tissue block oxygen level actually is one of the early indicators whether you have the virus or not. So actually there are different people like trying to use that to actually predict. And then it creates a market, and then if you can figure out it can work. So you see, what you want to do is really do a broader research. Do not let your starting point of your starting industry limit you. As you can see, we actually started with sports, and we went into quite a bit in healthcare. And then within healthcare, we actually find the divided markets even more. And with that, we find out they are more similar enough so we can actually replicate that process. What you want to do after this, I want you to be able to focus on what are the columns, what are the different industry segmentations you can focus on, and what are the roles, what are something you can actually look at and then compare how attractive different segments are. And then from there, I want you to be able to focus on a market that's fruitful enough, because there are lots of opportunity there. The whole world is your oyster. Problem is you only start with limited resources. So what you want to do is actually to focus on a beachhead market. This is a strategy. It's not only in startup. It's everywhere. It's how you get things done. right? If you think about World War II, when they fight Nazis, they didn't go to Europe and then take over the whole Europe. They couldn't. What they did is they picked a beachhead called Normandy, and they went there, they built a base. And from there, they continually move on. So this is what you want to do. Once you find out all the possibility you can have, you want to pick a market you can easily conquer. If it's too small, it's not big enough for you to actually build up your base. If it's too big, you may not be able to tackle it. So my rule of thumb is the market should be between $5 to $20 million. And it sounds a lot, but once you go out there, you may not get the whole market right away. It takes some time to build up the base. That will be a base you can work on. For our situation, after all the research we've done and examining where we can actually leverage partners and how severe the competition are, you might have already guessed, we actually went to kidney clinic because it was easy enough for us to develop the product, and we didn't need to change much from what we actually did before, and it wasn't as complicated cell process, and we didn't need to develop a lot of like additional feature. The company is still running, and I'm not a stakeholder for that company anymore. And they're actually moving into like surgical monitoring now, and they're still doing really well. But they all really started with one of the possibilities they had, and now they dominate in that space. So as you go and do your research, do it to a level where you can confidently say that I know the lead customers, I know I can convince them, I know exactly what they want, and we can replicate that cell process. This is what you often hear too, like end user profile. So in many ways, once you do talk to a lot of people, you want to be able to starting to focus. So it's like a funnel. You have lots of big data, but you want to starting to eliminate different possibilities. Those are all distractions. You want to be able to focus, and the end user profile will help you and your team focus on the problem you're trying to solve. And so for us, we focused on the kidney clinic, and we focused on that 2 hospitals we worked with. And so for this case, my example might be someone like you find a real person, and then you find most of them are within 25, 35-year-old, first job, transition from student to professional, right? So then like you use those to help you understand. And then from there, you actually need to ask them how much would they pay to solve that problem. The equation is really easy in many ways. Your total market, that what they also call TAM, will equal to how much a customer spending times the number of customers in that market in 1 year. With that, you can actually quantifiably analyze how big that market is, and then you can confidently tell people, we've done this, and we know what the market size is. Therefore, we think we're in a good position. With that, we need to move on to the next step, because now you actually should have a persona. You can accurately describe that person. This information will actually help you focus on the right person. You need to know their behaviors. You can accurately describe, okay, a customer Lucy, she behavior, and she likes organic foods. We know that. She typically likes to breastfeed all 3 kids. Health is important. So we know like these are all her habits, and we can target on that. And you also need to focus on solving a real problem, like what they need. All of those will help you and focus your energy and actually be successful. I know this has been a lot of information, so let's do a quick concept check. In many ways, if your friend Bob realizes there's no service station for really luxury vehicles in Saskatchewan, like a Lamborghini, Ferrari, those type of vehicles, so people need to drive away. So he rented a building, hired technician, get great coffee machine, maybe costs $30,000 from Italy, fly that in, got all the coffee ground directly from Colombia, and set up like just as what a luxury auto shop should be, and open the door. But 3 months later, he did not have customers, and that's a problem because now he's paying the rent, he's a hired technician, he's paying their salary, and he's not doing anything and like hoping this venture will work. And he has some really strong cash issue. As CEO, you feel the burn. You need to keep this running and keep the door open. But one day, his classmate Polly came, and they start chatting, and then everything went well. And she says, "My vehicle needs a tune-up." And she says, "Well, you have technician over there. They're not doing anything. Why don't you ask them to tune my Volvo up for $2,000?" Now, do you think Bob should take Polly's business? I'm gonna see if I can send this poll to you. Can you respond to say if Bob should take the business? Okay, we're still going. There's 7 yes, 4 no's. We have 7 people still considering. It's okay. There's no right or wrong answer. It's not. Let's see. What do you think the right thing would be? Okay, we have 4 more. I'm just gonna give you 30 more seconds. Cast your vote in. Otherwise, I'll close my poll. Okay, let's close the poll now. So right now we have 10 yeses and 5 no's. Can someone who votes yes tell me why you voted yes? If you voted yes, can you unmute yourself and tell us why you think that they should take it?
Yeah, Tate, I'll jump in on this one here. This is Andrew speaking. I mean, initially when I read the poll question, I thought, yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive for him to be working on a vehicle that he might consider not to be a luxury car. Some people might think, yeah, it's going against the brand and the identity that he's trying to create. But I mean, the reality is, money is money, and a certain cash flow right now might give Bob the resources to kind of, maybe transition his business or focus a little bit more. So it's just an opportunity to get resources to further execute on his vision.
Yeah, for sure. Good reasoning. And anyone else also voted yes? Any additional points?
Yeah, this is Mitchell speaking. Just to add on to what Andrew had to say, like I think he may have also misunderstood what the market was for luxury vehicles, and so maybe making this switch up and allowing more for vehicles like Volvos to come through might be a good idea for him to do, just to kind of set up his brand even, because he's not even well known, it seems like.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, also good point. We have no is a less popular opinion. Can someone in that camp who voted no speak up your reasoning?
Yeah, okay, so this is Alan's. So my opinion here is that 2000 is like not that much for him to risk. So if he wants to offer like this option, maybe he should come up with like a timeline with a plan or something and add this not just for one customer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also good reasoning. Some any additional points from this camp, like who voted no?
It's Freeman here. I totally agree with Eleanor's, because for me, in terms of a business perspective, yes, the initial start might be, and also what the company he stands for is luxury vehicles. Maybe just a demographic. Maybe the business is just taking a slower start, and also by just accepting an offer that, because according to the context, Polly is a classmate. It's not like she is signing a contract that she will do her constant maintenance with him forever because he has a business up, but it's just help me up for, because to some, for me, I think as long as it's something that he's, let's say, branching out to open to like help to do services for Volvo cars, yes. But if not, for me, I think, yes, that might be an indicator that he needs to do, let's say, market research or enhance a different market group. But that being mentioned, for me, if it's a business perspective, one does not need to downgrade in order to reach the client if he or she, if Bob was actually providing value through his current market. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, like all good reasons from both camps, right? Is there a right answer? Well, in my case, here's my opinion. There is a right answer, right? What we've been talking so far is what you need to focus your efforts. And so at this decision point, Bob will need to make a decision. As many of you said, he may not be focusing on solving a real problem. How will he know if he's solving a real problem? He saw like those luxury cars going around somewhere, but he needs to find out where are they taking their cars to get fixed? How much are they paying? Who are these people like driving around with those fancy cars? How can he fund them? Right? If you realize this is not a real problem, maybe you should change. But how do you know you should change? You have to go out and then find where were those people congregate, and then maybe you need to go to a luxury car club or trying to find out what type of people drive those type of vehicle. And you have to have confidence, actually have a conversation with them, find out, well, like, are they congregating around Saskatchewan? Do they take their car like even here? Are they seasonal people who coming in for trip just for summer so that they stay away from the heat? Are they raising family? Do they need their car to get fixed here? How do you find that out? You talk to them and find out what kind of behavior they like, where they gather. That will be the same for many of your products and then your solution. If if you don't have that conviction, and don't do the research to find out if this is a good idea or not, if you don't do that, at any point of your business, you could have a dry spot period. Do you continue, or do you give up and change? Right? Pivot is a popular word, but it's really a balance you need to find out, and you cannot do that all by your gut feeling. That will work sometimes, but sometimes it's wrong. Right? Flip a coin, 50-50% chance. As someone who's been educated and who has a conviction you can solve a problem, you need to be able to do that with better odds than 50-50. So for Bob's case, if he knows he's done the research and knew there's a chance, then he should go ahead and then stay with the luxury vehicle, right? If he hasn't done that, what I say is at this point, it's not about $2,000. He needs to go out and talk to people. Well, maybe he found out the only person he knows told him the problem, like, oh, I have a luxury vehicle that needs to be fixed, is Sam. And then he found out Sam is a lawyer. So maybe the next step you go is to Sam's law firm, find out how many of Sam's friends and coworkers drive same luxury vehicle, right? If you go to a law firm, 10 people, 3 people, you drive the vehicle. Well, rough estimation, 30% of them have a similar vehicle. Then you go to the next law firm and find out whether that stands true or not. That'll give you some first-hand qualitative data, right? You cannot Google that. You cannot ask anyone to do that for you, because if you can Google it, you're too late. That market has been conquered and someone has done a lot of work. So that you can only do that with first-hand information, right? If he found out the market itself is true and he done that work, and then now he did the work and then realizing, well, there are lots of people here with a luxury vehicle. Do I need to hold the brand? And he needs to make a decision, because now you realize the people who drive Ferrari and Lamborghini, do they want the car? Is that the performance that gave them the reason to drive? No, it's not, right? Like, it's a symbol, it's a status. So so what they want to do is actually show that they are quite unique, they're successful, there's image projected around that. They don't want to be seen, they take their fancy car to a dealership who serves everyone else. Then you need to focus. So if you can find that out, you think about this. People who drive fancy sports cars, they probably take a vacation every once in a while. A lot of them, what he found out, Sam was actually divorced, and ex-wife happened to be Polly's friends. Last thing he wants to do is to go to a shop where see Polly, because he knows there's a chance he may see his ex-wife there. Want to stay away from there. All of that are human behavior and information you can only find out by talking to those people and get to know them and solve the problem. I hope you remember this, because in many cases, especially nowadays is available in COVID situation, a lot of cash flows are slowed down. Your sales may be slow. You need to think, are you in a Volvo situation? What the situation is telling you? Do you need to actually go out and challenge yourself if you're solving a red problem? Or if you with conviction, you've done that, you know you're solving a red problem, the next thing you need to do is go out there and find those people and promote to them and focus on sell, and then make that. Don't get distracted. Distraction may seem profitable for a while, but in long term will hurt you. right? If you listen to Steve Jobs, and then he said once, they're just as proud for the things they didn't do at Apple, for the things they did. So entrepreneurship is about discipline. This is where discipline come in, and you need to have the first-hand information and proceed with conviction. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the profile and the persona just for the time's sake. But remember, like, these are the two different stage of clarity. One stage, you want to actually be able to draw a picture of who that person is and then predict them. And then the other stage is you actually can focus on one real person that accurately represents that segment group, right? So for the Bob's business, Sam would be the customer group. Then he would be able to use Sam as a persona and then go actually find out what the information would be and move on from there, and then design the service and use that process to reach to Sam's friends and Sam's colleagues and actually make some money. And that's where it comes really important. You have to be able to replicate your early success, right? There are many different types of strategies, and so what I'm recommending here is not the only way to success, but it's a easier way in some ways. Why do you want to target more people like Lucy? Well, if you already developed a product for this person and you know there are other people like them, this is a focused effort. You can actually sell the same product you already developed. You can standardize your sales process, especially if you're technical, you want to focus on your product. You may outsource your sales, but you have to be able to train them so that they can go out there convincing other people effectively why it's a good idea to use and pay and buy your product. And if you do it yourself, you don't want to spend time to learn a new pitch every day. That's horrible, right? You want to have a standard pitch. You go into the customer, you know what they want, and deliver. And that also means if you can pick them out with the information you have had before, that's low overhead. You don't waste your time. You can focus your energy. And Lucy, who enjoy your product, more likely talk about it with her friends. And that word of mouth is still the most important, right? Like, how many of us go to Yelp and find a restaurant and it's not as good, and then if someone you know tell you a restaurant you should go try out, we go. So do never underestimate the power of a happy customer, how much they can help you. And so that comes down to like this basic entrepreneurship strategy. What you want to do is either you develop and use the same product and develop a new customer, or you use your existing customer base and continue providing new product to them. Either way could work, but you need to think about your situation. Typically, if you're providing new product to the existing customer, that means new R&D effort. There's cost, there's development time. Someone needs to fund that. So if you can't fund the investor, it's all coming out of your pocket or coming out from your sales. And if you can actually sell your existing product to the same people, you can actually focus on that a lot easier. Of course, you can also go find new customer and offer them a new product, but you will be more scattered in that situation, right? So I'm just gonna very briefly touch on this. How do you create a persona? It's really nothing hard, but actually to call people and talk to them. You need to do what we call primary market research. If you're doing things right, after five interviews, you start seeing trends. After 10, you can actually make a pretty decent guess. And after 20, you know down the core, you're solving a real problem. And then like a reputation will only convince you that. If you have a slow start, then maybe that means your effort is not as focused. You need to think about it. And this part, I know a lot of people, when they work, they think about like trying to find someone else to do the market research. Don't do that. You cannot outsource your eyes and ears. It's very important you do this because you're the one who have the technical ability to create some solution. You have to be able to hear what the real needs are and actually address it in a proper way. And then, so this is the process I want you to hear about and think about for today. And if you want to read more reference book, these are two books, very short. Both of them are under 30 pages. One is called Stan Freely Does It Live Here? That's by Jennifer. And the other one is called Talking to Humans. And you can find them for free online. And if you want to copy, just send me a message. I can share with the group. This is a lot of information. Don't panic. The reason why I'm teaching this session is not to send you to do endless market research, and so then you waste all your time on that. At some point, you do have to say, I need to move forward. But I want you to be able to move forward with certainty and confidence, knowing you'll be successful. And if after this session, you're less certain about your project, that's a good sign, right? It's not a weakness to say that I realize this thing doesn't work, I can do something more successful. That's a strength and self-intelligence. So if you need to iterate and then go back to some of the process, keep doing that. I do think this is the best way to get you the information you need. So I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions for me?
Yeah, Tate, Andrew speaking here. Just a question about the difference between an end user profile and a persona. I know you kind of clarified that a little bit, but is the persona like a particular person, like a very specific person, and then the end user profile is kind of more generic in nature, or do I have that backwards?
Yeah, so this is one of the things. Actually, it depends where you find your source. Most people use them flip and flop. But the typical what I say when I'm in that is in your profile, you're drawing like a group people, you're drawing their behavior. Down to persona is that a typical person, a real person coming out of that group. Does that make sense?
Yes, that that provides a lot of clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so like it's like any research situation, you start out with lots of information, but you want to narrow your case, and you find a typical individual, a particular case that can actually represent most of your information, right? If you think about Isaac Newton's second law of physics, there's very few factors that summarize all kinds of planetary movements, and you can use that to predict quite accurately. So that's what we want you to do. Is there any other questions? How many of you have done a decent market research, or how many of you think like you don't know where to start yet?
I just don't have any resource to get started. For example, I don't even know like how the decision was made. If it's not a commodity product, for example, it's more like a um, like industrial product that involves the regulation and governing policymakers.
Yeah.
Like for those kind of stuff, I don't have the knowledge or access to the decision making process. Not to mention to identify who is the real customer. So
Yeah.
I think that's a difficult part to get started.
Yeah, for sure. That's very difficult. What industry are you looking at?
Looking at infrastructures like road, bridges, and so usually the owners are either big companies. They, for example, the potash company, they have a lot of structures, or it's the government, the city, they own those bridges.
Yeah, so you're looking at like big construction projects. So basically, one project could be up to like the upper swing of multi-millions, but so it's high stake, right? But the basic process of that is really the same. I actually have a group of students working on a civil engineering project right now in my design class, and they started off finding they know a technology could potentially solve a problem. So what we did is send them to any contact they know, right? So where did your project come from?
The project, like right now, it's coming from a consulting company. So like you said, it's a big project and hire different consulting company, do different components, and so currently, my current customer is a consulting company. They kind of get part of the problem and let me solve it.
Yeah. So then, like, you would rather actually become like the head of like product manager and go over there. So the principle is the same, right? Like your current contacts would be a good starting point, and then you can ask them some questions. But you want to position yourself carefully, and then find out some information and see what options they can offer you in collaboration in that case. The other thing is, because you can already outline some of the potential customers, like the company and the government agency, but that's not specific enough. What you want to do is actually to find out which department potentially you want to target and work for, right? So if you're looking at highway, it's the highway of ministry, and right, exactly. So you know that. What I would do is go on their website, find out the connection, either cold call them or send an email. And oftentimes, this is where LinkedIn is quite helpful if you don't have any connection. If you do have connection, I would say go talk to that connection, see if they can send you to people who they know can actually make that decision, because that warm introduction will give you higher chance getting a phone call or appointment. If you don't worry. I've done that before. You go on LinkedIn. You can. It's really great to find people in that unit and who are likely to make that decision. So typically a director or manager. So this apply to all of you if you're in that industry sector. Do that, and then once you identify that person, take advantage of the fact you are a student. So say you are a student, you're trying to solve a problem, and you want to learn something from them about a particular question, and be responsible with their time, and communicate very clearly in that email. So then you have to write it yourself. Don't download it anywhere. Write it, explain what you want to find out, and offer a few times that you are flexible to meet. And I would say the initial conversation offer about 15 to 20 minutes phone call, so they know it's not a lot of commitment to talk to you. And if it went well, from there you can do more, right?
Yeah.
And then schedule it in a more sensitive and respectful way, because a lot of them might have scheduled books 2 weeks ahead of time, so you have to make some allowance in that. And then don't be afraid to show some vulnerability. This is not something we train you in engineering school, but it's important to show that, and then they know you you are in need of help, and ask that respectfully. Typically, you're surprised how many times people actually get back to you. And with your phone call, what I typically recommend is you practice your phone calls down to the point, like you want to be able to focus on 2 or 3 questions you really want to ask, and then ask your question, present your case clearly, and provoke some information from them. And at the end, you will ask them, is there anyone else you would recommend me talking to?
Okay.
And or can we set up another meeting? Because that will leverage more opportunity for you, and you can go through the process.
Yeah.
And then now, because you talk to someone potentially at director level, and then when they send you to talk to some people potentially working below them, you can say, hey, I talked to XX, and then he says I should talk to you. You bet that would draw some attention, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So if any of you need support in that process, I'm happy to review your email or like practice some of those quick phone calls with you. It's a lot of skills, very important, and you will get better at as you practice. So I can be your dummy customer. Make your mistakes with me or with your friends. Don't start with your dream customer and just win it, right? If they guarantee you a 15 minutes phone call, it could potentially lead to a good opportunity. You don't want to ruin it. So start with some customers that's low risk bearing, and do that when you perfect approach your dream customers.
Well, that's really good.
Tate, do you mind if I add something really quickly?
Yeah, for sure.
Just out of personal experience, I know when we were first starting, and just to kind of reiterate your point, the importance of mentioning that you're a student and you're looking for ideas or confirmation on a project. Oftentimes, we just went door to door, going to like manufacturing shops, just asking if we could have time, and they were very hesitant. But as soon as you mention you're a student, you can see their shoulders relaxed because they're constantly being bombarded by salespeople or regulatory bodies all day. They don't want to hear somebody else. But when you mention that you're a student and you're there to listen to them and not try to sell them something, they often are like really receptive. Another thing we did was we just showed up at doors. I mean, this was during pre-COVID, but we didn't send any emails. We didn't send any, and I mean, because like we don't have much money. Our biggest asset is time. Is it doesn't take much to go and drive to a place and then say, hey, do you have 15 minutes? And if they say no, then oftentimes they can't say no because you're like already there. So what's 15 minutes? But if they do say no, it does require you to drive to your next place, but you have more than enough time. So yeah, no, if there's any opportunity to just show up, I'd recommend that. And the last thing I'd want to add is at the end of each call, what we did really well was offer people the opportunity to ask to reach out back to them again in 2 weeks. 7 people that are willing to meet with you kind of every 2 weeks, which is, twice a month, you get to meet with a customer every other day, right? To them, you're only reaching out once every 2 weeks, but because you have, say, 7 people, every second day you get to reach out and talk to someone who might be your prospective client. Found that really helpful. So yeah, just to kind of double down on what Tate mentioned, I think mentioning you're a student working on a project only helps you, and it doesn't delegitimize your product. Especially in Saskatchewan, if people hear that you're local, they want to be a part of the adventure. They want to say like, "How can I help?"
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Nelson. Nelson has gone through this process himself, and I think he's still going through some of the process because it's like we said, it's never ending. But I think this is also why I want to create this more community and student group potentially, so then all of you can work more closely and share experience and share some resources. This will help all of you. Don't spend your time thinking that classmates might steal my idea. You're from different technical background, you have different passion, so very unlikely you will do that. And then if you need to disguise some technical detail, you can, but build a community and share resources. And then people like Nelson has gone out and tried a few steps. And then I know like you're all at different stage. This is perfect because you can help each other right at the stage you are at. I have time maybe for one last question, if there is one. If not, I would like to call for a quick break, and then we can go into the industry experts panel.
Hey, I've got a question, if I could.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things I found out when reaching out to customers and speaking with them is at the end, like you had mentioned, Tate, you always ask, do you know anybody else that this might be of value to? And they almost always they say yes, but then you say okay, and they'll tell you the name, but then you say, can you make a connection or can you give me a way to contact them? And usually people are pretty hesitant to give that second way of contacting. So do you have suggestions? I don't know. They just don't want to give away somebody's personal information or whatever along those lines. So if anybody in the crowd or Tate yourself has suggestions on how to encourage them, that's an okay thing to give me a phone number or an email or what, that would be.
Yeah, so typically I actually, when I make those phone calls, I ask them to make a warm introduction. And most people actually have been saying yes. I don't know why they say no. So in this case, without more context, I can't really give you more answer. But typically, I would ask them why, and then one thing I think I often come back and reflect on my conversation to see if there's any opportunity. Maybe I need to actually build more trust with that person, because come down to it. They need to be able to trust you to hand over more context to you. And so then I think one thing you can reflect on that and ask them why, and be careful, like just so then don't come across as if you're selling something. So don't be too pushy. And the other part of that is, I think if oftentimes when people share a contact, so I often do is actually to say, can you give a name and where they work? And then I leverage LinkedIn, right? People on LinkedIn are expecting professional connections. So don't be afraid to reach out there and just say, hey, such and such, reckon I talk to you, and then you have a kind of a warm introduction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does actually. For most of the stuff, the people I'm talking to, I'd never really pictured them as being on LinkedIn, but come to think of it, yeah, that would probably be a good way to make that contact. So that's
yeah.
that's helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So I think let's end this session now. I'm happy to chat anytime like throughout the day for the rest of the week and beyond. Do feel free to reach out to me. But I think our industry panel is scheduled at 7, so I'll give everyone a quick bathroom break and come back. The link is actually a different link. So use the documents I provided you. Use the other link to sign in, and I will also send a new link to the Slack channel. So I'll end this session now, and I expect to see you in the other slide. Okay, thank you, everyone.